Hi there, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to our occasional pep talk series here on LinkedIn. My name is Jenn Walker Wall. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. If you're watching for the first time, I'm thrilled and honored that you are here today. I am a resume writer, a career strategist, and founder of Work Wonders Careers, where we help mission-driven professionals make moves that matter. And I'm thrilled today to have a friend and colleague here, Liz Cruz, who's going to be joining us in a conversation about rethinking influence and influence at work. So some of the things that I was thinking about when I reached out to Liz was like, what are the myths and stereotypes about being an influential person at work? How can you sort of begin to rethink your own approach to influence and ultimately create your own influencing style? So with that said, I want to introduce my guest here. It's so nice to have another face. Sometimes I do a lot of talking alone on this live stream, so it's nice to be in conversation with you, Liz. Liz is the founder and principal of Liz Cruz Consulting. Prior to her practice, Liz spent over 10 years in the corporate space as a coach, leadership development program leader, and organizational effectiveness consultant. As a leadership development practitioner to the core, you will often find Liz coaching individuals and teams, facilitating, nerding out about EQ, or ruminating on wholehearted leadership over a cup of decaf coffee. Obviously, you can see that we have a lot in common. I actually just quit coffee today, so we'll have that in common as well. And a special area of Liz's work is LGBTQ plus leadership development. So I am super thrilled and happy to have you here, Liz. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. I am so excited to be here. And this particular topic of influencing it just stays really fresh in my practice. It's something I get questions about all the time. So I'm excited to chat about it with you.
Good, good. So my first question is really around like, what is influence? Like, how do you just define that or conceptualize that for you and your clients?
Yeah. Well, something that I think you know about me that people close to me know is that um, a lot of what I think and feel and believe about any topic has to do with um, what are the norms around that topic and how do I disrupt them? And so I think where I want to start with this is that the question I get all the time about influencing is how do I influence without authority? That's sort of the hot topic for all of us. And I think to me, that really says something about the way that we've been taught to think about influencing, which is that we can affect other people's thoughts, behaviors, beliefs, choices, ways of thinking about things when we have power.
Hmm.
And that raises a red flag for me because I think, oh gosh, if I'm thinking I need to have power to do this thing, or if I do this thing, I will have power, I'm already playing a game I don't want to play. Right? There's already like especially in our workplaces when we're talking about power, we're always talking about power that is imbalanced, that is unequal. And so I want to challenge us to think about influence as a relational endeavor, right? And to think about, okay, I need to build support for my idea. I need to get my point of view across. I need to help this room full of senior leaders understand why the approach that I'm suggesting is a really, really good one. When we can approach those types of challenges as relational and get that work done through relationship, we can do it in a way that actually equalizes power and sort of disrupts the transactional nature of a lot of our work and workplaces and the transactional way that a lot of us are taught to operate as leaders.
I love so much about what you just said, and I can already tell, like, I want to dip to the questions that I came up with initially. I knew I would. I did warn you. So I guess I'm fully on board. I do not need any convincing about disrupting power and rebalancing things in the workplace. But do you have examples that come to mind of like what might, a normative example of influence look like versus, something that is more disruptive and relational?
Mhm, mhm. So I think that that example of I need to convince a room full of senior leaders that my idea is a really good one is a very common one, and I think it's the one that drives people most frequently to this question of how do I influence without authority? Because we start from a place often of feeling like, okay, I've got this great idea for a new program and I want to get it going, but the people who have the power to say yes to that thing are all above me in a hierarchy. And so I'm starting from a place of feeling like I don't have power. And the question then becomes, how do I convince them even though I don't have power? And I think a more relational and a more holistic way of approaching that is, how do I build the power of my idea, and how do I build power through the relationships that I have to 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 create a powerful alliance with,
Mm,
instead of trying to create power over a room full of people who have more positional and hierarchical and social power than I do in the organization. First of all, that's exhausting, right?
yeah,
That is just like a massive uphill climb.
right. I was going to say, is that is that successful?
I mean, if there's anyone out there who has had a lot of success at that, who has like somehow figured out from a lower place in a hierarchy how to have power over the people who sign checks and make decisions, let us know.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think it really is. And I think that when we approach from that way, we give more power to that hierarchy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so instead, we can think about a few different things to pay attention to. The first is, what are the informal structures or informal webs of relationship in the organization, right? So who do I need to think about building relationship with and creating alliance with? And sometimes that is a more senior leader. Sometimes it's an executive assistant, right?
Mm, I bet.
Sometimes it's just like someone who has the ear
Yeah.
of a person who you can kind of say, "Gosh, I've got this idea. Can you give me some advice on the best way to share this idea with this VP? Or can you help me to like find an opening for this idea? Or what challenge is this leader working on right now that this idea I have might help to solve?"
Yeah.
Right? When we can leverage those informal relationship webs, we can start to build a lot of opportunity to share our ideas and perspectives. Uh,
Totally.
so that's I think like a really beautiful place to start, is thinking about, instead of feeling like, gosh, I don't have any power in this organization, starting to look for, okay, where is the opportunity to build relationship with people who do.
What's so incredible about the approach you just described is that it is so sustainable and like it's something it's not transactional, it's not situational. When you invest in those relationships, you are investing in trust and access, like for the duration of your time there and perhaps beyond, right? Like
Mhm.
it's such a long-term way of thinking about it. It seems like it's efficient in its approach to like prioritize what's going to be long lasting, which is the dynamic, right?
That's right. That's right. The other thing I think it gives us the opportunity to do is to build a reputation for ourselves and for our teams and the work that we do. So if I have an idea that I know solves one problem that I'm interested in, and I find ways to create alliances and use that same idea to solve multiple problems. Well, all of a sudden, I am seen as a person in the organization who comes up with ideas that solve a bunch of problems at the same time.
Yes.
And the next time that a room full of folks are grappling with like a really juicy problem, I'm that much more likely to be someone that room full of people think, "Oh gosh, you know what? We should go talk to Liz and their team because they they could probably come up with something that could help us address this in a really creative way." Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also imagining because one of my questions for you is like, what resistance do you get? Like, what comes up in terms of resistance for your clients when you start engaging them in this work? And I'm already, as I'm listening to you, like I have my little like client voices like chiming in about how they don't like right to step be sort of like to potentially be perceived as like stepping on the toes of leadership or to
Mhm,
like unconsciously build their visibility or reputation at work. Like I think that would give a lot of people that I work with like immediate cringe vibes. Like they don't want to do it, right?
mhm,
But what they do want to do is be successful in their job and feel good about the process they use
mhm,
there.
mhm,
And
mhm.
I'm wondering, like, is that come up for you and your clients? Like, what else gets in the way of people sort of like shifting, not just their mindset, but their behavior, around this?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the coach in me is like, is that I don't wanna do it." Like, I see that a lot of corporate life can be about kind of like schmoozing and, like, doing relationship in a way that, like, doesn't feel authentic, to which I say, "Great, don't ever do relationship in a way that doesn't feel authentic to you," right? I think the other thing that can happen, though, is, we say things out loud like, I want to be better at influencing. And then we find out that being better at influencing means that I have to be confident in my ideas. I have to believe in my ideas enough to do vulnerable things. I have to be assertive and speak about my thoughts and feelings and beliefs to people who I don't know if they want to hear them. So find out, oh shoot, I have to start taking risks if I want to get better, if I want to grow my ability to influence. It means I have to take risks in relationship that may or may not pan out.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, the thing I'm saying out loud that I really want and the things that are lying under the surface that are keeping me from doing it are totally different things, right?
Mm,
So a lot of the work that I do in my practice with queer leaders is about building leadership confidence. And we are always talking about how are you seeing yourself in this situation? How are you how are you willing or not willing to express yourself, to assert yourself? And that stuff can be really scary too. And so sometimes if the surface goal is I want to be better at influencing, the thing we actually need to work on is I've got to be willing to raise my hand, open my mouth, share my ideas, and I have to interrogate all of the things that are going on for me that keep me from doing that in the first place. So I don't know that that reads as resistance to me as much as often uh, I think folks find out very quickly that the inner work that we need to do to grow in a skill like influencing can be maybe more than we expected it to be.
yeah. The other thing I sort of imagined or wondered about is like what you are proposing is not a quick fix, right? Like it's not like, oh, here's the secret formula for being successful at influencing and changing people's mind instantly. It's like a whole different approach, really, to how you show up at work.
Yeah,
So it's definitely not a quick fix.
yeah.
The other theme, really, and what I hear you saying, and this is really important to me because it was part of my experience, is like how how hard it is to be brave at work and courageous at work, and to take risks at work. And there were so many very clear moments in my career where I saw people not do the brave thing, and that was so demoralizing. So I think it's
Mhm.
so I think one of the sort of ripple effects of like taking ownership over what you're willing to go to bat for, and having that clarity of your values is like, I think it inspires other people to kind of show up in similar ways,
Mhm.
to show up bravely. And I don't have this conversation with my clients, but I do have this conversation with my friends. I'm like, get fired. Like, what's the like, like, what is worse, like staying in this job where you are constantly having to compromise yourself and what matters to you, or, like getting fired for trying to do the right thing. Like, I think we become, I'm not making light of getting fired or losing your job or your income or anything like that for anyone. But the mental and physical toll that not being brave takes, or not being around brave, courageous people, is
Mhm.
also extremely costly.
That's
So
right.
I do take a different tone with friends than coaching clients. So if many of my clients are watching, they'll not recognize that version. But I do sometimes think it's as clear as like, there's worse things than being fired.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I think we have to remember is that like getting fired is sort of an extreme outcome that a lot of us imagine. I have a game that I play with a lot of my clients when we start talking about something that is scary. And the game is, okay, great, it's scary. What's the worst possible outcome? And the worst possible outcome is usually like I say something in a meeting and no one says anything in response and it's just awkward and I feel terrible. And then without fail, if we chase, okay, if that happens, then what? And then what? And then what? And the story is always something like, and then my boss loses confidence in me. And then I have a bad performance review. And then my confidence is shaking, so I'm not doing that well. And then my boss loses even more confidence in me. And then I get fired. And then because I'm so terrible, I can't get another job. And then I can't pay my rent. And then I have to move in with my mom. And then eventually my mom gets tired of me. And then I don't have any place to live. And that's my life. And you know, it is such an extreme version. And it's really under the surface for a lot of us. And so I think when we start talking about, okay, what does it take to take a risk, to be a little bit more assertive about your idea, or to have a conversation with someone who you think this person is so senior in the organization, they can't possibly want to hear from me. The the imagined threat and risk associated with those activities is always going to be a million times bigger than the actual threat or risk, right? Which is usually we might be embarrassed for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That that is so true. I mean, sometimes when people tell me that they think they're going to get fired, like I'll probe a little bit and I'm like, well, tell me about the feedback. Tell me about your
Mhm.
performance evaluation. Are you on a performance? And like none of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no red flags. And not that things can't come out of the blue, but the sort of like normal, like if you've worked in HR, right, in any capacity, like there's a series of things you sort of look for to see if someone's job could really be in jeopardy. And almost none
Right.
of those will line up. So it is this like heightened risk of something that's possible but not likely.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and I've had my own, thoughts that that go in that direction, so I can really relate to it. But it is interesting when you probe, like, no, my performance evaluation is great. No one's given me any feedback that my
Yeah.
performance is not up to par, and it's like, okay, so let's trust that. Like, let's
Yeah.
let's move forward. Sounds like things are going well on that end. Um, I'm just curious if you'd be willing to share. Were there any like influential, no pun intended here, like influential people or circumstances that helped you kind of come to this like reimagining of how you think about like like normative leadership practices, but influence specifically?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, there is one tool that I want to share because it's a powerful tool, and I think, a moment ago when you said, "Oh, so there's no quick fix," I thought, "Oh gosh, what could we give the people that might be something you could deal with today that's not like, spend it's like, take this to your leadership coach and dig in." Um, And so this is a tool that I've used as a leadership development facilitator and as a coach. There's an assessment, but what I think is more useful is just the mental model. And the idea here is that we all have different stylistic preferences for how we like to influence, right? And so I'll lay these out, and I think one of them will probably resonate for everybody listening. So stylistically, there's a rationalizing approach to influencing, right? I'm just going to give you the data, I'm going to give you the facts, and then clearly you'll see that my idea is great because the facts line up.
Yeah.
There's an asserting approach. I am just going to tell you this is my idea, and then maybe we'll have a debate about it. And my approach is just to assert that my idea is the right one. There is an inspiring approach where I say, Jen, I have got this wild idea. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine what the world could be if we do X, Y, and Z. There's a bridging approach where I sit down with a team or a group of people or a diverse group of stakeholders and say, okay, everyone here has different wants, needs, and interests. Let's come up with a solution that can meet everybody's wants and needs and kind of bridge the interests of everyone. And then there's a negotiating approach where we can influence by being willing to kind of make trade-offs or compromises or find the give and take that allows someone to say yes to our ideas.
Yeah.
So in my experience, most of us hear that list and have one of us that goes, oh yeah, that's what I like to do. I like to stand up in front of a room and paint a beautiful picture and get everyone really emotionally invested and inspired and excited. And when I do that, people usually come to my idea.
Yeah.
The tricky thing is that we are very rarely influencing people or groups of people who have the same preferences as us.
Mm.
Right. And so there are a couple things we can do. And one is to get really good at the way that we like to influence. And the other that I think is actually more important is to get really good at the other styles.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'll just share a story from my own career that I think really brings this into focus. I spent the first 14 years of my career in a company that was very people focused. Everything was about how will this decision affect our team members? How will it affect our customers? Let's think about how will a particular approach feel and affect and what will this be like for the people? So I really was trained in my career to take a people-centric approach and to influence by thinking about the collective and by thinking about a beautiful imagined future. So I built a whole life for myself influencing that way. And then I left that organization, and my goal was to go work someplace as completely different as I could. And so I took a job in tech, working for an organization that is super, super data driven. Everything is about the data. Everything is about take your idea and find the data that supports it. You've got to prove it.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I found myself in an environment where even though I had that same skill set of being able to say, let's talk to all of the people and let's think about the future, what I needed to do was to be able to find data and to take a super data-driven approach to conveying my ideas. And it was really painful.
Mm.
It was really painful, and I can't tell you how many days I went home at the end of the day and just said, you know what? These people, first of all, these people are a bunch of robots, and all they care about is data.
Yeah.
It took me a lot of time and a lot of practice to realize, okay, culturally, that's how it's done here. That's how these leaders prefer to receive their information. And I actually can do both, right? I can think about the people, I can paint a really beautiful picture of the future, and I need to bring in the data that supports it. And so as I became acclimated to that and learned how to use data to strengthen my position and strengthen my offering, I found that I was able to be much more effective, and it was my way into building relationships with a lot of people who I sort of came to find out that, like, actually, they're only so interested in data, right? These are actually just regular human beings who are also very interested in thinking about other people, in being being, like, inspired by ideas.
Yeah.
These are people who are willing to sit down and, like, negotiate about an idea if we're close but not quite there. So the strength really is in, being able to flex our styles and being able to change our approach, which I think brings me all the way back around to this is a relational challenge,
Yeah.
right? We really have to know and pay attention to who who is it I'm trying to influence, and what do I notice about that person and how they approach these conversations.
Yeah, it was so interesting because as you're telling that story, I was thinking about how I worked in research for so much of my career. So that like data-driven, rational, even assertive, rational approach like would have
Mhm.
worked perfectly fine for like 90% of what needed to be, discussed. But there were other issues, right? And so kind of what you're coming up against is not just like what approach people prefer, but what approach people think they prefer. But actually, you need to be a little flexible because I think on different issues, different conversations, like you do need to flex a little bit. And the other thing I love is that there's so much room in your description of these areas to do things well, right? Like it's not like this is a relational approach. It's like these are approaches that will help you take a relational approach
Mhm.
to a lot of things, I imagine. And I love that. And I also I think it's so, that early job where everything was people focused. I wonder how many of us who ended up doing this kind of work with our lives, like had that formative experience where this was the approach, right? Like this was the priority, like in a values driven organization or leader. It was, I don't know about you, but I didn't realize how formative it was in the time, but to like leave that workplace and realize that people don't care about these things and to be the one sort of holding the ground and holding the
Mhm.
line. Yeah, I had a similar experience. It was pretty formative as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, I had so many experiences, in that second organization where I felt like, gosh, this is really dehumanized. And over the years, what I have learned is that, actually, even a super values driven organization can be dehumanized in its own ways, right? My reflection on my experience of that first organization is like, okay, that was hardly perfect. A lot of that has to do with the fact that, like, this is still capitalism. It's all capitalism, right? We're all operating in a system that, um, is inherently dehumanizing, right? So there's that.
Sure.
Um, but the other thing that I have really taken away from operating in a more data driven space is the skill of thinking about, okay, how do I use facts and data to help me make better decisions, to help me be more effective in what I do? So I would say, just on those kind of environmental differences and having both of those as a foundation, I think for a lot of us as leaders, there's a beauty to being able to blend and shift and kind of change our approaches based on what's in front of me right now, who's in front of me right now, and what do I need to do.
I can imagine there's a lot of circumstances where you could paint a really great picture of the future with some data points, right? Like that benchmark you or that tell you you're going in the right direction or help really solidify what that will look like. They're certainly not mutually exclusive. Do you have any thoughts or advice for people who are I'll link to that. If you want to send me the link, I'll add it to the comments here and I'll send it out with the replay and every time I share this. Any thoughts for people who are just like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to think about, how I like to approach this. And I'm going to, engage risk a little, think about engaging risk a little bit, in my work.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, please do share the blog post that I have that kind of goes over that model, because I think it's a good one to just start sort of conceptualizing, like, oh, what is my style and what is my go-to? How do I prefer to influence? I think for someone who's sitting down and they're like, all right, I'm going to work on this and I'm ready to kind of build my capacity for influence. A couple of places that I think can be good to start. And the first is going back to kind of that organizational web of relationships. And if that's something you can draw for your organization, an interesting way of doing that is starting, if you have an org chart that is clearly defined, you can even pull that, print it out, and just start drawing on it.
Mm.
Here are the formal connections. How are people informally connected? What are sort of the dotted lines? What are the relationship lines? Because often what you can see in that is, gosh, all of these people are connected through this one person. That one person seems like a good person to build relationship with, right? Because their role in the organization informally is really that they're a connector.
Yeah.
So I think that can be a powerful place to start. And then the second is just start looking for opportunities to brag on yourself and on your team. Even if you don't have a thing you need to influence about right now, just start sharing the really great stuff that you're doing and that your team is doing. The more vocal you are about it in your organization and in your network, the more you will take up space in people's minds as they're thinking about the help that they need, right? So I think an ideal situation is you've got a great idea. You actually don't even need to go out and influence about it, because you have people coming to you and saying, we've got this challenge. What do you think about it? We need some help from you and your team, right? You want folks coming to you and thinking this person and their team are the go-to for whatever the type of issue is in your organization. And then the third thing that I would think about is, in a broad relational sense, what are the practices that you use to build trust and connection with the people you work with? What does that mean for you? For some of us, trust means showing up really consistently. And for some of us, trust means being there when things are really tough. So whatever it means for you, what are your opportunities to build more trust and more connection with the people around you and with the people you want to have those professional relationships with? And I think the nice thing about any of those approaches is that they're not just going to help you to be a better influencer. They're going to help you to have a network of people you can draw on when you need help. They're going to help you to have a team that's more excited about the work that y'all are doing, because they know that you, as their leader, are celebrating and sort of shouting how great they are from the rooftops. Those relational approaches do so much for us, not just in any one way, but across our relationships.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like we need another hour at least. We've scratched the surface here. So I would love to, I know I'm getting push notifications. I don't know if you're getting push notifications. I know we're up against some breaking news. So in case people are not catching us live, where can people find out more about your work? If they have questions or interested in working with you, like where can they find you after this if they're watching the replay?
Yeah, I'll say first, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I accept every single connection request. Even when I think someone's trying to sell me something, I accept it.
It must be a lot.
It's a lot, but I just say yes, especially because I work with queer folks, and I just never know who's who's out, who's not. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. And then my website has a ton of information about my work. So it's just lizcruzconsulting.com, and you'll find a lot of free resources. You'll find a lot of writings there. You'll find a little video quiz that will take you through all of my coaching offerings and help you to see if we might be a good fit for coaching. So please head over there, and there are myriad ways to contact me through my website too.
Perfect. And can I convince you to come back for another conversation so we can dive even deeper? Like, I think
Yes.
there's a lot to unpack here. Awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those who are watching live and watching the replay. I really appreciate your time, Liz, and I have a feeling you'll be hearing some folks. So
Yes,
thanks.
Jen, thanks so much for a great conversation.
Awesome.